Hello and welcome to Board Game Gumbo. Today we're unboxing Lockup from Thunderworks Games. This is a game for 1 to 5 players that plays in 45 to 90 minutes. It's essentially an area control game where you have some hidden information. So here we have our rulebook. So there are some advanced rules. There's a way to play with unique factions as opposed to just everybody being the same faction. And there's also a solo mode. And a little cheat sheet on the back. So here we have our different factions. So each faction is going to come with the same 6 pieces here, as well as a player board. And your units are going to be numbered 5, 4, 3, 2. You have 1 lookout, and then you have 1, essentially, I believe they're called bruisers, and their strength is going to be equal to whatever your power value is. And you're going to be able to have an option to increase your power value during the course of the game. So these will just pop out like so. And then if you want to play with the advanced rules, you simply flip the boards over, and now you can see that the factions are different. 1, the kobolds don't start with a power cube here, where the bugbears do. The bugbears start with a suspicion. The bugbears can hold considerably more items than the kobolds. And then also the kobolds will score points at the end of the game. And then bugbears have additional point scoring at the end of the game, as well as they get to start the game with 1 reserved item from the item deck. So if you want to play with these advanced rules, I do recommend it. I think it's the better way to play the game, but it is an optional rule. So our other factions, we have gnolls and goblins. And their advanced sizes here. And then we have the guards, which is only used in solo play. So you see they have no tokens here. And the insectoids. So next we have a punch board for each faction. This is going to slot into your tile holders for each faction. So we'll just punch these out real quick so I can show you how that works when we get that component. So each player is going to have one of these little token holders. And you're going to take this piece here that we just punched out and slide it in here to let you know which faction they belong to. So now when the gnoll player, the purple player, has their figures in front of them, the other players aren't going to know what those figures are. They just got them held here so he can see what they are. But obviously if you flip it around, you just see their units in jail cells, which is a neat little touch. Got extra bags, some cards, and the rest of our components. So let's look at our board first before we get into all of that. The board is double-sided. There's a side for a 2-player game, and then there's a side for any game count above 2. So 3, 4, and 5. So here's our game board. You can see the round counter here. So you're going to play through 6 rounds. And essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to have area control of these 8 different areas, starting with the exercise yard and then going around until you end with the library. And you're going to do that by playing your workers out to the board. So when it comes to your turn, you have essentially 2 options. You can either play workers or you can pass. But if you pass, you're out for the rest of the round. So basically you want to play your workers until they're all out, unless you have some other way of getting workers out, which there are. So when you play workers on your turn, you can play any amount of workers you want, but they all have to go to the same area. So if you're playing workers to the exercise yard, you can play as many of your 6 workers as you want, but they all have to go to the exercise yard. You also have, during the course of the round, the ability to play a certain number of your workers face down so that your opponents don't know which value they are. It changes depending on the player count. I believe in a 2-player game, you can play 3 of them face down. And then at every other player count, you can play 2 of them face down. So I could, if I wanted to, I could play this 2 and the 4 here to the exercise yard, but I'm going to play the 4 face down so my opponents don't know that that's what I've played there. And that would be my action, my turn. And then it would go to the next player who take their action, put out where they want to put their workers into one of the areas, and then so on until everybody is passed. After every player is passed, then you're going to go through each area and you're going to determine who has the most strength there. So obviously you're going to reveal any hidden tokens, and then based off of who has the most strength in that area, they're going to get a reward depending on the area. So in the exercise yard here, the person who has the most strength is going to get a strength cube. Now, most factions are going to start with a strength cube, but you can gain more throughout the course of the game. So here we've got our little gray cubes, which are our suspicion, and then red cubes for our strength. So at the start of the game, we can see here on the null faction board, they started with 1 power cube. And as I said, that determines the strength of your bruiser, your fighter token here. So this fighter token is worth 1 value. But because I just won the exercise yard, assuming that 6 was enough, I would now have 2 here. So he would be worth 2 value, which includes this turn. So wherever this token is on the board, it is now going to be resolved as a 2 instead of a 1. And you'll do that with each area. The infirmary gives you resource cubes, and each area here has a different way to hand out rewards. So the infirmary, typically speaking, the person who has the most strength, who's first, is going to get the best reward. But the infirmary gives rewards to the person who has the most strength and the person who has the least amount of strength. So if there's 3 people there, the person who has middle strength is not going to get anything. And you'll just get these resource cubes, which will go to your player board. The smithy gives out iron for first and second place. The commissary at the top lets you exchange resources. So the person who has the most strength is just going to get any resource that they want. The person who has the second most strength can exchange 1 resource that they have for any other type of resource. And then every other player there can exchange 2 resources for 1 resource. The Chow Hall here allows you to gain goons, which are these cards here, which will get placed out every round. There is a spot in most of the locations for one of these goon cards. You can see it here. It's clearly labeled goon card, whereas this is the same size card, but clearly says tome deck. So you're going to put a goon out to this area, and typically, although not in this one, they will put out additional items. So if we were placing out this bandit would put an additional suspicion and an additional blue resource out into whatever location you put him out at. So even though you normally get green resources here, if you win here, you'll also get the blue resource. And typically speaking, the player who places has the most strength in an area will get any suspicion that's placed in the area, unless they have played their lookout. And your lookout basically makes you immune to gaining suspicion from that area. So you place one of these goons out into each location, and then the winner of the Chow Hall or the second place player or so on will be able to buy goons for resources. And you want to do that because, one, sometimes goons give you bonuses. So this one lets you get rid of suspicion. Sometimes they have these little icons on them, which are like set collection. You can gain points based off of different numbers or certain amounts of these. And then they also give just victory points at the end of the game based off of how many you have. So if you only have 1 Ratman at the end of the game, you actually get -3 points. But if you have 4, they're worth 13 points. Whereas the bandit is just worth 3 points, just straight up. So there is a reason to collect goons. There's some that also give you resources instantly when you gain them or what have you. The next area is the cell block. and the sell block allows you to either build or reserve item cards. So you're collecting these resources as you are controlling these areas. The sewers are giving you green cubes, infirmary is giving you blue cubes, and so on. And what you do with those cubes is that you build these items here. And items, one, have this same set collection possibilities here. They potentially have a little symbol up there. These look like these are mixed in with the solo cards. So they'll typically have a set collection icon on them. They'll have some ability. So this one lets you give away one of your suspicion, force it onto another player. And they're typically going to score you a certain number of points at the end of the game. To build them, you're going to need whatever resources are at the bottom here. So you need 2 iron to build this. You need 2 iron from the smithy, and then you need to go to the sell block and build it. You can also reserve items. When you reserve an item, you pay 1 of any resource. Doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't have to be listed on the card. And you simply take the card and put it face down in front of you. You haven't built it. You don't get the benefit of it or the points from it, but nobody else can build it. And you can have any number of those cards in front of you throughout the course of the game. The last spot here is the library. And the library is interesting because if you ever don't gain something, your units go to the library. So earlier we mentioned the infirmary pays out to the person who has the most strength and the person who has the least amount of strength. So if there's somebody there who's in the middle there, they didn't gain anything. Their units, whether it's 1 or 2 or however many, will immediately go to the library. So it's kind of a consolation prize. When you are at the library, if you have the most amount of strength at the library, you get to draw 2 tome cards, and you're going to look at them and you're going to decide to keep one of them. The one you don't want is going to go to the bottom of the tome deck. And then the second and third most is just going to get the top card of the deck. And these tome cards do interesting things. This one is, when resolving a location, add 1 to your crew's strength. So you can either force a tie or break ties. Move 1 of your crew tokens from the library to the sell block. So there's a lot of different things that those cards let you do. The last thing that we haven't looked at yet are the objective cards, as well as the trait cards. I'm not going to go through the solo cards because I'm not very familiar with that rule set. So the trait cards are another way to make the factions unique. So in addition to playing on the backside of your player board, which gives you a different setup than every other player, you can also play with these trait cards. And they, first of all, they give you a unique ability, as well as potentially resources. And they also give you victory points. And that's just a few of those. There's actually quite a few trait cards to choose from. And then you also have objective cards, and there are 3 types of objective cards. There's leader cards, there's instant cards, and then there's end of game cards. And they are all mixed in. So I'm just going to find a few of them quickly. So the end of game objectives are pretty much what you would imagine. They score at the end of the game. They'll typically score for multiple people. So at the end of the game, have the most items with an iron cost. If you have the most, you get 8 points. Second most, get 4 points. There's also some where every player will score. So for instance, this one, at the end of the game, each player scores points for the different types of goons that they have. So those are the 2 types of in-game scoring cards. There's also instant cards. Be the first player to have 4 suspicion cubes. When you do that, you're simply going to gain this card, and it's going to be worth 8 points to you, which you'll score immediately, and you will just hang on to this card for the rest of the game. This one is, be the first player to have 4 power cubes. You'll score 6 points. And there's only going to be 1 of each of these cards dealt at the beginning of the game. 1 leader, 1 instant, and 1 in-game. The leader cards are probably the most interesting ones because they can get passed around the table. So this one, leader card, the collector, take this card if you currently have the most complete sets of valuables, minimum of 1. So 1 of each different valuable type. And then you'll put this card in front of you, but you won't score the points because this card can be taken from you during the course of the game if somebody has more complete sets. So later in the game, if somebody else has 2 complete sets and you still only have your 1, they'll take this leader card from you. And then if somebody completes 3 complete sets, they'll take it, and so on. This one is take this card if you currently have the most dwarf goons with a minimum of 2, but as people collect more dwarf goons, they could take this card from you. So that's it. That's everything you're going to get in a copy of Lockup from Thunderworks Games.